J.C. Dugard was kidnapped at age 11 years old in 1991 and imprisoned in a backyard compound where she was repeatedly raped by her kidnapper and gave birth to two of his daughters. You can see this is the compound, her kidnappers. That's J.C. This was a new magazine cover after her kidnapping had happened. She and her daughters were rescued 18 years later in 2009. In a 2011 article found on abcnews.com, J.C. and her therapist, Rebecca Bailey, spoke about how much horses in equine therapy had helped J.C. and her daughters cope with the trauma and the symptoms of PTSD that they were left with after their horrifying experience. Today, I want to reveal to you the many ways that horses facilitate the treatment of PTSD and other mental health disorders. The use of equine therapy has become more prevalent in recent years to treat PTSD. Specially trained instructors use carefully selected horses to help people overcome these symptoms and people who struggle daily with these issues. However, it's not always about treatment and therapy. When engaging in recreational horseback riding activities and sports, people suffering from mental illness also often note an overall improvement in symptoms and even to their psychological health in general. In America, mental illness affects 1 in 17 adults every year. That's 1 in 5 Americans. And it's also 1 in 5 children every year. You can see these are the statistics here. And this is from NAMI, the National Association of Mental Illness. And further, NAMI also tells us that 1 in 4 American families has a relative suffering with mental illness. It's pretty brutal. The U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs tells us that 7.8% of Americans experience PTSD, and 30% of those sufferers identified as combat veterans. With statistics like these, most all of us in this room are affected in some way. Today, I'm going to share with you the impact that horses can have on the healing, recovery, and coping skills of people who, like J.C. Dugard, are living every day with PTSD, and also on those struggling daily with the symptoms of mental illness. You've already heard J.C. Dugard's story. Now I'm going to go a bit more in depth about PTSD and horses. The website for the National Institute for Mental Health tells us that PTSD, which stands for post-traumatic stress disorder, is an anxiety disorder that can develop after exposure to a terrifying event or ordeal in which there was the potential or actual occurrence of grave physical harm. And you can see here, this is just some words on a thought bubble that were put together about PTSD. The type of traumas that may trigger PTSD include violent personal assaults, natural or human-caused disasters, accidents, and military combat. Symptoms usually associated with PTSD are persistent thoughts and memories of the ordeal, insomnia, feelings of detachment, and paranoia. While anyone can fall victim to PTSD, one of the most common sufferers associated are combat veterans. Tim Hayes, writing for the Huffington Post, tells us the story of Sergeant Frances Kirkson, a girl who loved playing soldier growing up and enlisted at age 20. She told her family that she was proud to be part of America's best fighting force. But when she came back from Iraq after serving there for 8 months, she wasn't the same person and suffered night terrors, flashbacks, anxiety attacks, and hallucinations. Physical touch became intolerable and she was completely unable to trust. Her personal relationships were suffering and she found herself unable to live a normal life. She tried outpatient therapy, exercise, work, and dieting. After 2 years, recovery seemed hopeless. Sergeant Kirkson enrolled in a program called Heroes for Horses, where she began working with a therapy horse named Rainbow. She had this to say: "Work heals your sense of trust. I didn't know somebody wanted to be with me to make me feel good or to make themselves feel good. My horse Rainbow didn't know me from before the war. All she knew was what she saw when she made net. She didn't want anything from me, didn't expect anything. I didn't have to talk about my feelings, I could just feel them and she was okay with it. She opened me up. When I realized she had started to trust me, it was the first time since I had come home from the war that I felt like me, like I had gotten my old self back." Sergeant Kirkson's story illustrates one instance in which a horse was able to reach someone suffering with PTSD who had become unreachable. EAGALA stands for Equine Assisted Growth and Learning Association. You see their logo here. While EAP stands for Equine Assisted Psychotherapy, and that's basically a method used to help people. Information from EAGALA tells us that EAGALA is currently utilizing EAP in order to help veterans recover from the debilitating effects of PTSD. Though most of the programs are in their infancy, the results are overwhelmingly positive. Quoted on EAGALA's brochure, Suzanne T. Lisi of the VA Medical Center in Canandaigua, New York, tells us, We have conducted a number of IAGALA EAP sessions. The veterans who participate tell me they have never found a group or individual session so useful and life-changing, and that they have found hope. After these workshops, many reflect frequently on the experience and skills learned and then take these lessons into their daily lives. An interesting fact is that with EAP, there is no writing involved and all services take place on the ground, such as grooming and touching. You can see here, these veterans, they're not riding these horses, they're just petting, they're touching, and they're connecting again. Horses are used as metaphors and stand-ins for the challenges and issues in a client's life. Horses have a unique ability to read people's moods and nonverbal cues, and this can lead to major emotional breakthroughs. Results from an IAGALA pilot program conducted by Refuge Services in Texas tells us that after only 6 sessions, service members and their spouses reported drastic and measurable improvements in their marriages, such as fewer fights and incidents of abuse. And again, that's from IAGALA's military brochure. Now that I've told you about horses and PTSD, I'd like to spend some time speaking about the benefits of recreational and competitive horseback riding and the effects they can have on the life of someone struggling with mental illness. People who live daily with mental illness and struggle with symptoms like low self-esteem and lack of self-confidence can be greatly benefited by horseback riding as a leisure or competitive sport. The Certified Horsemanship Association has posted an article on their site by Sarah Evers Conrad about the top 15 benefits of horseback riding. One benefit noted is psychological health. The article tells us that horseback riding develops confidence and self-esteem through the rider first learning to stay on and then meeting goals set by riding instructors or themselves. When a rider masters those skills, the feelings of accomplishment make a big impact. Riding is not easy, and it's not an ability everybody has. Therefore, becoming a skilled rider means having a skill not everyone does. This can also mean a boost in self-esteem for a rider. My son, James Byrne, lives every day with bipolar I disorder. Among his symptoms are low self-esteem and lack of self-confidence and extreme reluctance to trust or connect with people. For all of those reasons, he and I thought that horseback riding might be a good choice of sports for him. We decided against traditional equine therapy because James already participates in so many traditional therapy-related activities. I consider myself a fairly reliable source on James, and I'm fairly knowledgeable about bipolar itself at this point. I can therefore tell you that the impact horseback riding has had on James's mental health, and specifically his symptoms of low self-esteem, lack of self-confidence, and the lack of connectivity and inability to trust that he struggles with, have had a ripple effect throughout every aspect of his life. He's been through a lot of therapists and struggles with connecting with and trusting each and every new one that he's assigned to. Before he started riding, a new therapist could be such a stressor to him that it could actually trigger a manic episode. Riding has taught him how to connect with another living creature and taught him teamwork building skills. Now, when he inevitably loses one therapist and gains another, he is much more willing to try to work with them and forge a bond. He learned that trust from the horses that he rides. In school and at home, he's never believed that he's good at anything. This has led him to perpetually fail because he never wants to try. When he began riding, he realized that not only was he able to do it, but that many kids his age were afraid of horses or unable to master the skills and progress as he had. This gave him such a confidence boost that he began to attempt and succeed at tasks in school that he never thought he could do before, like math. He'd tell himself that if he could ride a 1,200-pound horse, he could handle the math assignment. I've now seen him successfully play that thinking in most tasks he finds daunting. He's never considered himself capable of playing any kind of sport either. He's never thought he was good enough at anything and was frankly not interested in working with teammates. Horseback riding has been an ideal sport for him and has also taught him the value of working as a team. He must work with his horse and communicate with her in order to succeed at any task in the ring. Last month, he competed in his first competition. He took 4th place in both of his classes on Easy, this is Easy, his primary equine teammate. In typical James fashion, he shrugged off what was a great success for a first competition, stating he should have had last place. Still, his pride in his success is evident in his display of the 2 white ribbons in his bedroom, something he never would have done before. You can see him in his 4th place ribbons here. He's pretty happy about it. He plans to keep on riding and competing and is currently preparing for his next competition in the spring. The examples I've given are just a brief snapshot of some of the ways that horses can help humans cope with, facilitate the recovery from, and in many instances both, from PTSD and other mental illnesses. Among just a few of those that can be helped are combat veterans and those who struggle daily with mental illness. Simply look to people like Casey Dugard, Sergeant Francis Kirkson, and my own son, James Byrne, to see the far-reaching benefits. Finally, I'd like to leave you with a quote from Sir Winston Churchill today. There is something about the outside of a horse that is good for the inside of a man.
All right, Mel, what did you think?
I have way more positive than a few negatives, so I'm gonna go ahead and say the things that I found negative. Okay. I think the reading, obviously everyone has to work on that. You need to look up a little bit more to kind of tell, well, you could see that you're reading. So that and like you have a lot of information. It was good information, it was solid information, but there was just a lot, so it was kind of hard to squeeze into the time frame. So just those two things, but I like the way you stated your thesis was clear, so everyone knew what you were talking about. Your topic was interesting, so like it wasn't boring, you know. I like how you explained how like the statistics of PTSD and how it affects us too. So you kind of like involved us in that in a way, and then how you made it personal, and then you explained the terms like well, so like it wasn't confusing. So like you just defined everything really well. So I thought that was good too. And I liked your emotions when you were like presenting, so like it kept us like, I don't know how to say, it just kept us interested, I guess. So you did a good job.
Yeah, Jamie, I think most of the things that you did are spot on, exactly the kind of thing that I would want anybody to do in their presentation. I only have 2 or 3 things to mention that I think could be improved on, and then I'll want to compliment you on a couple of things that I really liked. Organizationally, I think as you set up a good preview at the start of the speech, but I think in the body of the speech, there are a couple of spots where we just move on, and I think there needs to be a slightly stronger signpost, but that is such a minor thing that I wouldn't worry about it. The visuals, I think, are a little busy, and you probably need maybe one image on each slide at a time, and there's several of them that have multiples. Like that first one, I know it's the story of J.C. Dugard and all the stuff that's going on there, but there are 8 images on that one thing, and probably you could get by with the magazine cover and maybe one other picture later on with her and the girls, and maybe the horse, kind of thing, and that would be enough. Later on, you've got the multiple pictures of the soldiers working with the horses, and I think maybe one, since you don't really talk about what is different about those kinds of things, it's just you could probably have one there and keep it simpler and a little bit, then people maybe stay a little bit more focused. It's tough to pick a picture of your son that's going to work best because, hey, they're both pretty damn good, and that sort of thing. Same sort of thing, though. Maybe pick one thing that works really well. And I think the one with the horse probably would be the one that I would choose because you do get the ribbons, you get your son, and you get the horse, and you get to talk about the horse as part of that. And that's the kind of stuff that people like. The other thing, Mel mentioned it, and I've mentioned it to a lot of people, everybody's working on their delivery. They're a little dependent on their notes, and that's understandable. The more you work from an outline instead of writing a script, the better off you're going to be. As soon as you write a script, you want to read it. That's all there is to it. When people have a script, they want to read the script, or they try to memorize it, which is also a little bit problematic. I think you're better off working from an outline and then just talking to the audience a little bit more. Time is the other thing that I'm going to yell at. It went almost 2 minutes over time. There's a lot in the speech. I appreciate that. The things that I, though, especially wanted to compliment you on, I like the fact that you integrated stories into what you were talking about. It's not just, here's what a therapist says, here's some statistics, here's a story of somebody, and you give us some details about that story. You've got J.C. Dugard at the start. You've got the sergeant that you mentioned who comes back and has got PTSD. You've got your son that you talk about, and all of them are good ways to personalize the subject. And I think that's the kind of stuff that makes it interesting to people. That this is about something that's real and tangible, that somebody's affected by it some way. And it's not just that you mention their name, you tell us about what went on in those things. There's detail to that story, and that's the kind of thing that really makes the speech work the best. All right, thank you. I know you have